Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Manufacturing Matters podcast, where we aim to discuss the trends and technologies reshaping manufacturing today. I have the great pleasure of once again being joined by my friend and colleague, Win Harden. Win, always a pleasure.
Good to see you, Jimmy.
And we are joined by Ozgur Tohumcu, who is a general manager for automotive and manufacturing at Amazon Web Services, and is a tremendous pleasure to have you, Ozgur. I really appreciate having you on here, and thanks for taking the time.
Great to be here. Thanks for making the time, and nice to see you, Jimmy and Win.
Of course, yeah. So let's jump right in there then. And I'd like to know from your perspective, like what's most exciting for you all at AWS today?
Quite a few things, but I think probably what I would say is in the company I'm at right now, I feel like we have a front seat row to everything that's happening in the tech space across manufacturing industry. And we're going to talk about it throughout today. What's happening with AI, how it's impacting the industry as a whole. But ultimately, it's such a fast-changing world. I've been in the technology space in the last 25 plus years. I haven't seen this much unprecedented change. You think we were talking about AI assistants a year ago, now we're already talking about agents. And I think being at a company like AWS, you really get a front seat row. The other thing is, of course, in that front seat row, we're not just watching, but we're also working with some really large key customers who are thinking through their business challenges, thinking through what's next for them, thinking about speed, how they can accelerate their own transformation. What's super exciting for me is like how we partner with them, because if you look at the space, the tech is such a big part of the company strategy now. It's not just sitting in the IT department. It is part of it's on the board agenda. It's on the CEO agenda. And we feel like being an AWS, we're part of that thinking and future planning. So that's super exciting.
Yeah.
You know, Amazon Web Services, which is the correct acronym, correct, of AWS?
Yes.
Right, fantastic. And with your perspective, you know, in the center of automotive and manufacturing, I just wanted to share how excited I am about this particular episode, because as you mentioned, we are going through this point of data transformation, right? And manufacturing has traditionally been very, I don't want to say sparse isn't the correct word, but protective of their data for lots of good reasons, liability risk. And finally, the marketplace has realized the benefits that come from cloud services, right? So that's very exciting. And then AWS being one of the largest data providers in the world, you guys are really at the center of how manufacturing is leveraging cloud services across the board, AI, and many other applications that we'll talk about today. So super stoked you can make it, Ozgur. Thank you so much. So we've mentioned about some of the major trends in AI and other locations. What are some of the major challenges that manufacturers, is it still about data acquisition for them, how to get the data into the cloud, or is it visualizing how to best use it? What are the big challenges they're dealing with on a daily?
There's always a technology challenge, but if I can start maybe with the business challenges, first of all, and I think it's going to lead to how the data and AI is actually helping with that as well. I think one of the biggest challenges, especially in the US, is the labor shortage. You continuously have a shortage of qualified factory workers. I think right after COVID, it was 1.4 million. Estimated shortage is estimated to be almost up to 2 million by 2030. There's a big labor shortage, and people are retiring. I think one of the challenges is going to be like, how do you actually retain that experience? How do you retain that knowledge? And we can discuss that throughout the day. The other big challenge is, again, around supply chain. We're reminded every 2 years how vulnerable our supply chains are. It was about during COVID, we thought we solved the whole optimization, linear programming, inventory planning challenges of the world. During COVID, we were reminded that was not the case. Then a lot of automotive industry went through a big microchip shortage. Models were delayed. So I think we were reminded once again how vulnerable it is. Now we see impact coming from tariffs, for example. We see again how our supply chains are super vulnerable. I think that continues to be an issue. Inflation, I think in the last few years, I think about 10, 20 years ago, growing up, I actually lived in a world where inflation was not a concern. Just in the last few years, it's not a pretty big thing. I think it has a big impact on costs. I think those are the macro level challenges for the manufacturers. Then coming to your point, I think that it translates into a lot of like technology challenges. OT, IT integration is still a challenge. Like how do you actually capture the data? To your point, I think manufacturers are precious about their data. They're also super paranoid about security. And when you have so many machinery out in the field, sitting in so many different locations, how do you actually maintain the security of your data where like if a single machine could actually allow a point where people can hack into your whole network and data repository. So there are a lot of data challenges, but I would say the major challenges have been mostly on the business side. However, maybe I'll lead you to your upcoming questions, but however, we're seeing a very fast adoption when it comes to some of the AI related technologies in manufacturing, because it's actually creating a way to almost jump ahead and skip a few technology shifts when it comes to the existing infrastructure, how they can leverage technology using the latest AI tool sets. And then we can talk about that later in the show.
I know. I'd love. Can you give us a couple examples about how we're able to how the AI is helping us leapfrog? And I also was wondering if, I mean, when we talk about data acquisition and existing infrastructure, there's a lot of legacy networks out there, not just legacy equipment. And there's been a lot of effort to improve the security of the individual at the edge of the network and everything. But so would love to hear about how AI is leapfrogging, and does leveraging a powerful cloud partner help you to increase your security, especially when you're still dealing with maybe very widespread, large geographically spread legacy networks?
Sure. Look, I mean, I think maybe I'll give an example. Like, for example, one of the things that we're seeing is, especially with AI agents becoming popular, we're seeing a super fast adoption across the manufacturing industry. Why is that? I mean, ultimately, agents are the next layer of the next level of automation. And the whole concept of automation is not new to the manufacturing industry. As a matter of fact, when the the AI assistants came about, the conversations I had with many of the manufacturing customers we had was, okay, we understand that the assistant is gonna make a recommendation, but that's not enough for us because we want full automation, we want execution. So when we moved into not just the recommendation, but based on an algorithm and through learning, how the agents are able to also execute on some of the actions, such as, I mean, that could be doing your inventory planning and not necessarily just giving you the plan, but actually executing on doing the actual planning. When you think about, for example, use of vision-based systems in the factory floor, it's not only showing you where the defects are, but it's also then giving the data back into the manufacturing line to actually correct the process so the defects are being addressed. I think being able to build the execution part into the overall manufacturing process has been quite widely adopted across the industry. That's like one example I was mentioning. When a lot of our other customers are looking to work with assistants, I see a lot of the manufacturing customers are already moving into agents because automation based on complex algorithms, based on learning, really matters to them.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that manufacturers are using AI today, and you've touched on a number of them, right? And agentic AI is obviously a really hot topic right now. But in the space of AI, generative AI is something that's very popular beyond just the factory floor, even just for fun, right? But when it first came out, it was maybe almost dismissed by some as being something that would not be potentially all that useful, or at least it wasn't there yet. But in the last however long, 6 months, year, whatever, it really seems like people are taking on generative AI and finding value. I know I have personally for my job. What are your thoughts there? What's your take on generative AI and how it can add value, or how you've seen it add value?
I think in two ways, really. One is, maybe I'll start at the people who are actually using it and what that means for the overall enterprise, for the organization. like, I mean, AI and like AI related technologies have been around for a number of years. I think what made generative AI became like so hot and like everyone using it all of a sudden, even my mom, is like since in the last 2 3 years, is the whole interface between the human and the machine became conversational. All of a sudden, we felt like we can talk as if you're talking to a human, like we're doing right now, and you're actually talking to a machine. And that barrier, which required a bunch of software programmers, IT engineers, was dissolving. So I think one of the biggest benefits of generative AI is actually given the power of creativity in the hands of people. And people with very little AI skill sets can actually harness the technology and can create things. We see different implementations across different enterprises. Some are very much believing in the democratization of this and just giving it in the hands of all their workers. I mean, maybe not all of them, but most, but then putting the right governance around it. Then we see some other more reluctant manufacturing customers saying, look, I mean, I'm going to give it to this subset of the users where I can, quote unquote, control how they're using it. I mean, we believe on the first matter. I think the first group, because you can easily implement governance with some of the like use of some of the cloud technologies and centralized governance methods. The other point that I'm going to make is essentially you touched on that, Jimmy, as well. Like in my opinion, one of the biggest differentiators in manufacturing today, how fast you're able to bring innovation to market. You have an idea, how long does it take for that idea to actually make it into a product, into a market? And I think generative AI has really shrunk the product design and development lifecycle there. I mean, the design that you were able to do over weeks, now you're able to do within days, even within a day, because you're able to iterate so much faster. You're just basically having a conversation interface with the machine and asking how you want it to be done a little bit differently. The development cycle has shrunk significantly as well, because a lot of the generative AI tools are actually shrinking that as well. Testing validation has been so much faster now because we're able to generate using AI test cases automatically that people were writing by hand, putting in Word docs and all that. So I think shrinking the product design and development lifecycle and being able to bring innovation to market much faster has been the big thing that Gen AI, I think, has brought into the manufacturing industry.
Even in the wider space, it's incredibly useful for even small tasks. I hate to admit it, but I was on a plane just a couple of days ago and I saw a guy who I believe was an executive or president type, and he was putting his emails into ChatGPT. I don't know if he was asking it to make him sound friendlier or to summarize or what, but it's just like easy little tasks like that, incredibly useful.
Absolutely.
So we didn't really define this. So it's for the users who may not be familiar with intelligent agent versus assistant. Ozgur, can you kind of separate those two?
Absolutely. I think that's a great call out, and we should have done that. Thanks for that. So the way we see it, I mean, is an assistant is basically looking at set of data and is making a recommendation around what you should be doing. An agent is actually looking at that same set of data and taking an action on that. It's actually doing something like executing something.
Right.
And in some cases, you may have human in the loop. In some cases, you don't have human in the loop. But the agent is actually the additional part is around the execution part. And then maybe we haven't talked about it, but you also have the next evolution, which is agentic systems. It's essentially multiple agents talking to each other, and therefore being able to execute tasks autonomously, but in coordination with each other. And once again, I think this is super useful for the manufacturing industry, because even if your data is sitting in silos, you can actually create one agent doing taking one action on your set of data, and you could have another agent taking another action on another set of data. But those agents can actually interact and talk to each other. You don't have to bring all the data together, but the agents can actually interact with each other. I mean, I'll give you an example from maybe to illustrate the point. I hope I can. I'm really definitely going to now try to put this in. I'm thinking out loud now, so you need to bear with me. But
No worries.
an assistant would be essentially like you're booking a flight. Now you're searching for flights. You're finding the most available flight, the time, date, whatever the price. Um, the agent would be actually you're booking your whole trip with the car rentals and the hotel and everything. The agentic system would be more like you're going to Spain for vacation for a week, and you ask the question to the agent or the agentic system, can you please plan a week-long vacation for me in Spain? And then the whole thing is actually designed and executed for you, including all the tours that you will be taking to the historical sites or to the beaches. So I think it's like different levels of complexity and levels of execution.
Then
I'm sure the agent would do a better job than me. For example, one of the last places I went down in the islands didn't have air conditioning. And so, I mean, the agent would probably like, Win, I know that's historical and cool, but we know how you feel about air conditioning. So it could have saved me a lot of trouble. You know, we've as you know, in our other job over at Tech B2B Marketing, work with a lot of manufacturers. And in one case, we've been working with a team to develop an intelligent agent. You have manufacturers that have 500,000 SKUs, right? Across lots of different product lines, all kinds of different customizable parameters for each item. And, you know, they've had engineers that for years have been pricing those out as necessary, developing CAD files and pricing out. But we're finding that we can write intelligent agents that will reverse engineer these different pricing calculations and then help us and then apply that to all. And maybe they've only got 100 or 200,000 SKUs that they've actually produced and have clear BOM on there and pricing structures. And then an intelligent agent that can fill out the other 350,000 is a massive time-saving capability. And then, engineers can go back and ground truth a couple of batches at a time in each category to make sure that the agent is doing what they want it to do, make small adjustments as necessary. Can you give us any other examples, maybe without sharing the end user customer, about those intelligent agents or even and how manufacturers specifically are using those, or some good use cases for folks?
I mean, we have, I can actually share one with an example. Like we've been working with Kone Escalator, the company, like for a number of years, and they've been a big customer of ours. I mean, these guys move probably, I don't know, like hundreds of millions of people every day. And then they've been around for so many years. So one of the things that they've done is, because if you think about it, like how annoying it is when an escalator or an elevator is not working, it's a pretty big nuisance for everyone.
It's been in the news recently, as a matter of fact.
Yes, it has been. Yes, that is very true. That is very true. And I use the tube living in London. You sometimes go to the tube station and the escalator is not working. I mean, it's quite a big nuisance. And I think it's something that has to be fixed pretty fast.
Yeah.
So what happens is like when something breaks down, you actually call the company, and then it needs to be troubleshooted, it needs to be fixed. One of the things we have done is working with them is we actually put in years and years of troubleshooting data, all of their operators manuals that are relevant for all different types and models and years of escalators and elevators these guys have built. Mm-hmm. All the customer calls, how things were solved or not solved into essentially our AI models. And then we created this assistant where when somebody actually calls with a problem, you're having a conversation interface with an agent. And then at some point, it's handed off to the customer service representative, of course. But by the time you get there, like 90%, 95% probability the problem already is known. It has been detected somewhere else. Okay, I'm calling about an escalator problem in London, but it's probably the same problem that was fixed in San Francisco like 5 years ago.
Right.
So I think this type of consolidation of enterprise knowledge coming from completely different sources, including the tribal knowledge that some of your workers might have, into a repository, being able to tap into that is outstanding. And this has been a huge success, I think, in terms of like how they're able to respond to customer calls, how fast they're able to actually solve the problems. It's been a big success working with the Kone guys.
Outstanding.
It veers a little bit off of like maybe our core topic of manufacturing, but I'm curious from your perspective, Ozgur, like a lot of different technologies have made their way beyond the factory floor and into people's houses, right? And a lot of people are using AI already, and they have been for years, and they don't realize it. I'm just wondering, like we had a conversation with a company that does agentic AI a while ago, and we were talking about its potential usefulness in the household. Have you seen that at all, or could you see it? And I made the joke before, but like, wouldn't it be useful to know if my 9-year-old did a good job brushing his teeth, or how many cookies my 6-year-old stole, or things like that? Like, will the technology ever be approachable enough for normal everyday people to use?
I think it's happening now. I feel like it's a little bit like now, like you're gonna be able to tell my age, but like in I don't know exactly what year was that, but I remember the time when AOL was actually sending these CDs to everyone, so they could download the CD.
I did too. Yeah.
Me too. Me too.
We're all of that gen.
Exactly, we're all from the same area. So when we downloaded the software and we were able to get on internet, I mean, it was a pretty magical moment. Like something that was deemed as this internet that was sitting out there. All of a sudden, you're able to access it sitting on your personal computer or Mac. I think we're at a similar moment when it comes to AI. You're gonna see it like right now. We talk about this thing as if it's like this other thing. I think you're gonna see it as getting into pretty much every gadget, everything we use at home, starting probably with the more smart equipment you have, your smartphone, your vehicle. But eventually, I mean, it's going to make it down to your vacuum cleaner, your coffee maker. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to become more and more embedded into the software that actually comes with, even if it's like a firmware, it's going to come in pretty much anything and everything you do. Even your electric toothbrush at some point is definitely going to have some level of AI in it, I think, at the edge. And I think that type of, that's the way how it's going to become so pervasive. And it's going to become part of our lives, being embedded like into anything and everything we know. And at some point, 5 years later, maybe, we're not going to be asking the question because we're going to know it's already there. Just like you assume many of your things at home are connected, you're going to assume there's some level of AI application or a tool set sitting in the equipment that you're using at home.
Yeah, it's not hard to imagine, especially large volume like appliances. A refrigerator, using it for preventive maintenance, monitoring its operation, not just so that you can avoid your refrigerator breaking on you, but so that you can know when a compressor is running too high and it's sucking up too much power, and optimizing your power bill, which would be a very real, very today possible scenario. So
whether your milk is out of code. You could easily do that.
I already know that. Date codes are optional. All right, I'm just saying that's just the way it is.
To your point, I think things in terms of I think things that are easy to measure and show a lot of fluctuation, and based on that fluctuation, there's also, again, I think you need to think about if you were to ask the question to yourself, where would be the first applications? Mm-hmm. Then I think the answer is going to be in those areas where there's enough benefit, like your electricity bill is not small, that there's some fluctuation, there's some level of unpredictability, there's some level of pricing change based on the way you use it or your working habits. So that's like a prime area to your point, when you could see agents coming in and actually organizing things for you.
100%. And it's interesting because cost savings would be a big reason why manufacturers, so ultimately they always say it's the power of the pocketbook that generally drives us, right? And of course, safety and other benefits too, but the pocketbook drives a lot of decisions in manufacturing. Can you, let's say that we've got some customers, we've got some folks out there in manufacturing who are considering, how can I best use AI to make my enterprise more efficient? Is there an initial checklist of 3 or 4 things that they should consider before moving forward, getting their ducks in a row before they come speak to AWS or whatever?
Sure. I think I'll give like two perspectives. One is a little bit around like the mindset. The other is a little bit around like where we see early applications being used already. So I'm a bit more practical. Um, on the mindset side, the first questions I would ask, I think all manufacturers should ask is like where is the bigger pain point in my operations? Because we see a lot of about 2 3 years ago when we were talking about it, like when AI and generative AI became super hot, we saw a lot of CEO mandates essentially calling the CIO and saying like, okay, what are we doing on generative AI? Please do something. So we saw all these like POCs pop up, which 90% of them didn't make it to production because it was actually working on things that was not solving a real business problem or addressing a pain point. So I think starting with the question like, what is my pain point? Like, where do I think in my operations there's a higher cost or there's a lack of predictability? I think that's where I would first recommend for the manufacturers to start looking into. The other thing I would say is then the tools are so easy to use. I would really recommend a lot of experimentation. And in a way that, I mean, if you're not experimenting fast enough, the tech is changing so fast that like you are going to be always working on something that's already like, I don't want to say obsolete, but not the latest. So I think fast experimentation and iteration is super important because you're learning. As you're learning, you're basically applying your learnings. And then maybe the third part is think about scaling. One thing that we have seen is when manufacturers or other customers are doing the experimentation, it looks fantastic on a few use cases. But all of a sudden, when you're scaling it across your global operations or hundreds of machinery, you look at the cost and you're like, wow, this doesn't make sense. A prime example of that is around like using what LLMs or what large language models to use in the backend, what foundational models to tap into. Like if you have a very basic question, maybe you don't need the most expensive model. I mean, you're gonna like if you use the most expensive model, when you're experimenting a few cases, you're gonna get a fantastically accurate response. But do you really need it? You probably could get the same accurate answer from a much less expensive model. That's why, for example, like one of the things that we talk about, if I can do a little bit like 2 minutes of AWS promotion, like we have our Bedrock service, and one of the beauties of this service is actually gives you choice to all foundational models out there. It gives you price benchmarking. So when you have a simple question, you use the cheapest model. When you have a very complex question, you go and use a more expensive, more elaborate model. So I think these are the things, like think about the pain point you want to solve, experiment and fast iterate, and then always think about scaling, because when you scale, you're going to see a different economics that you may need to rethink your overall design. On the more practical side, like inventory management, supply chain, predictive maintenance, these are all like areas that we see most manufacturers start experimenting already. Because it really impacts quality, recalls, after sales type of issues. It has direct impact on cost.
When it's funny because when you were talking about first analyze the benefits and find that good use case. I mean, to me, I think to translate that to manufacturers is basically look for waste, look for areas of waste and inefficiency, right? And the ones that are costing you a lot of money, and that's a good place to help identify places where it might be able to improve. And then I love your point and your second point, which is basically experiment, which means iterate. And when DL early AI or deep learning was first coming out several years ago, a lot of the CEOs called the CIOs, they got integrators and everything else, and a lot of people got burned by the integration, the NRE, non-recurring engineering costs, to iterate. But now, with the advent and the prevalence of LMS, to be able to translate an application need directly into execution, leveraging models that have already been well trained, because that was usually the huge component, right? Was how do I acquire enough data to optimize my model so that I'm going to have enough accuracy? Is it correct to say that the prevalence of available models today, the growth of LMS have made it infinitely cheaper for people to experiment and iterate? Is that a fair
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I'm not sure if it's infinitely, but
Okay, yeah. I'm in marketing. I can overstate.
But absolutely, and I think it's of course a very competitive space as well. You have new model providers coming in, focusing on different parts of the problem or the business challenge. So absolutely, I think the choice really matters, and then that gives you a lot of optionality in terms of like what type of model you want to work with, and that optionality I think gives you a lot of like flexibility in terms of like how you want to design your operation. Maybe one thing that because what you said gave me another idea. Like one thing that we underestimate sometimes is, of course, in the opening you mentioned around data and cloud as well. I wanted to touch on that a little bit because it's something we're seeing in the last 6 to 9 months a lot. As our manufacturing customers are looking to leverage AI and generative AI, one of the things they're realizing, well, wow, I can see how I can do all these things, but my underlying data foundation is not entirely ready yet. So, or I designed it, or my architecture is not suitable to do this. Even some advanced manufacturers out there who have been using cloud technologies, sometimes even multiple cloud players, they're realizing, look, I mean, I'm using these like multiple cloud players and I have some on-prem, but now like this doesn't make sense because the AI use cases I want to run, it gets one data from here, it gets one data from there. It's creating a lot of like cross-cloud computing costs. So we see a lot of the AI and what you could do with AI has led to rethinking of data architectures. How should I think about my data strategy? How do I think about the enterprise data? What is important for me? What should reside where? So we see a lot of focus on data as well as a result of what AI has been providing as options for manufacturers to work with.
So I'm curious. We've talked about a lot of different technologies today. Excuse me. And somebody, with your experience and exposure to larger manufacturers, are there any other trends or technologies that we haven't touched on that are notable? Like, for example, I would think of cloud native infrastructure or software defined systems. Anything like this that stands out to you that you've seen recently?
Sure. I mean, quite a few. Let me keep it brief. Like one is definitely, I mean, one is around digital twins. That's a big thing. Ultimately, it goes back to a little bit to the concept of speed as well as quality. Like how can you actually create a digital twin of your operations so you're able to decouple the hardware and the software so you can experiment on the software much faster, iterate, see where the problems are, see how you can accelerate. Let's say product development was one example we discussed, and then how you then put it back onto the physical systems and replicate that. I think digital twins is a big one. The other is, again, I mean, we talked about robotics a little bit, but I expect a huge increase of use of like humanoids and more robots on the factory floor, especially with coming with agentic systems that we discussed. Like I picture in a few years, I mean, you're gonna have humanoids walking around in the factories, handing off tasks to humans, and humans handing out tasks to humanoids, and they're actually talking in whatever language they choose, English, Korean, German, wherever they are. And I think the working environment is going to become truly hybrid. For some reason, we as humans feel more comfortable when the robot looks like a human. So I think we're going to see more and more humanoids show up on the digital factory floor. And to your point, I think the whole concept of what we refer to it as, Jimmy, is like a software-defined factory. Like how are you able to rethink design of your factory or manufacturing operations so it is software defined, meaning you're able to make changes much easier to it in a way that creates an abstraction or a separation between the software layer and the physical machinery that's in the factory. Because to the extent that you can create that abstraction, It's going to make your operations a lot more flexible, a lot more agile, and you're not stuck to the machinery that's on the floor. I'll give you an example from Amazon, not Amazon Web Services, but from Amazon. I recently visited a fulfillment center, and in the fulfillment center, these are huge warehouses. That's essentially where the Amazon.com packages get shipped around and sorted and all that. As you can imagine, we use a lot of robotics, vision-based systems, and these things. But one thing that I learned in one of my visits was, like, there are quite a few humans actually in these fulfillment centers, and the reason being is humans provide an incredible level of flexibility in terms of doing one task today and doing another task tomorrow and being able to move around freely. And I was told by the fulfillment designer, center designer, is that, like, they actually don't like too many machines in the fulfillment center, because when you have too many big physical machines in the fulfillment center, it creates a level of operational gravity and lack of flexibility. Right. So I think operations are going to become much. That's why this whole concept of software-defined factory and software-defined operations is so crucial for the future.
That is super cool, and I hope that we can get together some future state and talk about, maybe get some guidance from you about how manufacturers would evaluate their existing data infrastructure, because and then, you know, in whether it's terms of load sharing, maybe a couple more specific examples in that area. But I know we've already kept you pretty long today, so I guess that's a little seed. I'm hoping we can get you back on the show in a few months.
That would be awesome. I would be happy to. This was a little deeper.
That would be super cool. Ozgur, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure. For our audience, I know you guys have all really enjoyed this. If you have any questions for AWS or Ozgur, please post them below. We'll make sure they get to them. Ozgur, where should they go to get more information about your section of AWS?
Well, I mean, probably the best place to go is find me on LinkedIn, or you could go do a quick search on AWS and manufacturing in any search engine, and it would lead to our webpage.
Awesome. All right, so fire away any questions, guys. Hope you like this. Be sure to like and subscribe. You can find past episodes at manufacturing-matters.com. If you'd like to be on a future episode, let us know. And until the next time we all come together, have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.